My boyfriend has a girl bro. A female friend who acts more like a guy. She talks sweetly, like she's trying to please everyone, and even has the nerve to wear the same color dress as me. I labeled her a manipulative tomboy. At least, that's what I thought until one stormy day when she carried me on her back for 5 kilometers through the rain. Welcome to History. Subscribe to follow all our latest adventures. Story begins. The first time I met Jodie Atkins was at one of Garth Scotchmer's Brotherhood dinners. Before we arrived, Garth had casually mentioned, "Jodie's just one of the guys." But when I saw her, I was confused. Jodie Atkins had delicate, radiant features and was wearing a soft, white dress that exuded elegance. As she looked up at me from her seat, her face blossomed with shy dimples, nothing like the guy I had been led to expect. She was slim, the white dress making her look effortlessly graceful. I, on the other hand, felt a little self-conscious about my curvy figure, especially since my dress was the exact same color. Jodie smiled and said, "Wow, what a coincidence, we're wearing the same color." Her words cut deeper than they should have. Next to her, I felt like a clown. Trying to brush off the awkwardness, I extended my hand in a friendly gesture. But just then, Garth laughed and playfully nudged Jodie, saying, "You're seeing her all innocent now, but she used to chase me around trying to beat me up." Jodie immediately sprang up and slapped Garth's shoulder, her voice playful yet sharp like a chirping sparrow. "Stop making things up." They teased each other, laughing as though they were the only two in the room. And there I was, standing awkwardly with my hands still in the air, feeling like an outsider. The sting of tears welled up behind my eyes, but I closed them tight. I didn't want to be the jealous girlfriend at our first meeting with his friends. But when I heard the loud smack echo through the room, I opened my eyes. Garth was standing there with a bright red handprint on his cheek. He shouted, half laughing, "Damn, you really went all out with that one." Over time, I got to know Jodie Atkins better. Garth often spoke highly of her. How she was always so positive and carefree, the kind of girl who'd been raised with everything she could want. I followed her on Instagram, where her photos told the story of an adventurous life. Surfing in Hawaii, her lithe figure like a bird soaring over the waves. Skiing in Hokkaido. Writing papers in a charming cafe in England, looking every bit the graceful intellectual. Her slender neck like a swan's. Despite the playful rivalry between Jodie and me, I couldn't help but admit to Garth, she really is an impressive person. Garth peeked over at my phone and grinned. "Hey, how'd she open up her Instagram for you? She usually only lets people see the last 3 days." His comment made my sensitive mind race. Why had she suddenly decided to show me her whole life after I became her follower? As I scrolled through her feed, Garth hovered close, urging me to keep going to the next picture, his excitement evident. But the more I looked, the more the green-eyed monster inside me grew. Half joking, half serious, I asked, "Do you like her?" Garth laughed it off. "Come on, who wouldn't like a girl like her? But relax, she's not interested in dating." He then added, "Besides, if something was going to happen between us, it would have happened by now." Yet even as he said that, I could see his eyes lingering on her pictures a little too long, like someone longing for a treasure just out of reach. The name Jodie Atkins had echoed in my mind long before I ever met her. It was on the night Garth finally confessed his feelings to me. He had been drunk, slurring her name over and over again. "Jodie, Jodie." He was a mess, sobbing at the restaurant like a lost puppy. His friends had rolled their eyes and said, "Dude, she's just studying abroad, not dead." When they called me to pick him up, I half dragged, half carried him home, only for him to throw up all over me in the flower bed outside his building. Back then, the Caroline Gray who stood there was young and naive, head over heels for Garth Scotchmer. I didn't even mind the vomit on my sweatshirt. I just wanted to take care of him, to be the one who never abandoned him. That night, through his drunken haze, Garth grabbed my wrist with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. His eyes, though bleary, burned with a fire as he said, "You're the only one who won't leave me." Then, almost as if granting me some great favor, he added, "Let's be together." I loved Garth fiercely and sincerely, with all my heart. But deep down, I always felt that somewhere, hidden in the corners of his mind, was Jodie Atkins. And I couldn't help but resent her for it. Things only got more complicated when Jodie returned from abroad, disrupting the fragile balance we had. Despite my discomfort, she constantly invited both Garth and me to hang out together. It was like she had flown back into our lives, a proud bird with no regard for the havoc she was causing. Once, she asked us to play badminton. I didn't want to go but couldn't bear the thought of Garth spending time alone with her. I begged him, "Please, can't you just say no this time? I'm terrible at badminton, and I don't want to play." Garth looked at me seriously and said, "But I want to play." His words stung. "Can't you just go with someone else another time? Why does it have to be Jodie today?" I stammered. His brow furrowed with irritation. "What, am I supposed to stop doing normal things just because of you? I never realized you were so possessive." His dismissive tone made it clear. I had no choice but to go with him. At the court, Jodie was in her element, dressed in a sporty skirt with her ponytail bouncing like a proud little bird. She tossed a racket to me with a grin. "Caroline, let's play." "I'm not very good at this," I tried to decline but Garth chimed in. "I'll play with you." Jodie insisted with a playful smirk. "Nope, it's me and Caroline." I had no choice but to go along, and just as I feared, she wiped the floor with me. I couldn't return a single serve and clumsily stumbled around the court like a bumbling raccoon. I was humiliated, especially in front of Garth. Was she doing this on purpose? After the game, her face flushed and her hair slightly tousled. Jodie still looked like a perfect porcelain doll. As I bent down to pick up the shuttlecock, I muttered, "I'm done." Jodie just smiled sweetly. "Let's take a break then." She tied her hair back, using her teeth to hold a hair tie in place, her long swan-like neck exposed in an almost taunting way. And when I turned, there was Garth, staring at her without even blinking. I hated Jodie Atkins. I hated the way she slipped into our lives so effortlessly, like she belonged there, and how I felt powerless to stop it. The more time Garth spent around her, the more openly he admired her. And when I brought it up, he would always say, "Jodie and I are just friends. You're the one I'm with. Don't overthink it." But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was nothing more than a backup plan, someone he settled for because I was dependable and good for him. Jodie, of course, remained blissfully unaware of the turmoil she was stirring inside me. She kept inviting us out, this time to the movies. She sent us the tickets in advance, and I couldn't help but notice the seating arrangement. 2 seats together in the back row, and 1 seat in front. I knew immediately who would be sitting alone. It was a horror movie, perfect for Jodie to play the damsel in distress and cozy up to Garth, that manipulative little witch. Sure enough, as soon as we arrived at the theater, she clung to my arm with wide, innocent eyes, asking sweetly, "Caroline, you don't mind, do you?" I couldn't help it. I was about to lose my temper. But before I could even speak, Jodie Atkins cut me off with a surprising suggestion. "I'll sit with Caroline. Garth, you sit up front. You don't mind, do you?" Her voice carried a hint of playful command, the upward lilt at the end daring anyone to disagree. Garth scratched his nose, pretending to joke. All right, Your Highness. I thought you needed me to protect you, though." In the dim glow of the movie theater, with only the flickering light of the screen illuminating the room, I sat there observing Jodie Atkins more than the film itself. Horror movies had never scared me. Honestly, the despair I often felt towards life made death and ghosts seem trivial. But Jodie? She seemed genuinely terrified. Her lips, soft as rose petals, were clamped between her teeth, her brows furrowed in fear. Her fingers trembled slightly as though the dread was too much for her. Was she really that frightened? When a particularly eerie scene flashed on the screen, Jodie let out a small gasp, her whole body curling in on itself like a startled cat. Her lanky frame, all 5 feet 9 inches of it, seemed to shrink as if she wanted to disappear into her seat. For a brief moment, her wide-eyed panic was almost cute, if not a little ridiculous. I was silently amused until she suddenly leaned into me. Her soft figure pressed against my side, and I caught the faint scent of freesia lingering in the air, light and delicate. "Sister." Her voice was husky, soft as a kitten's purr. "I'm so scared. Can you hold my hand? Please?" Her warm breath grazed my ear as she whispered, and a shiver ran down my spine. She was so close, her scent intoxicating, her touch soft and cool like silk. I glanced down at her, her innocent eyes locking with mine, and without thinking, I reached out and held her hand. Her hand was cold and smooth. At that exact moment, Garth, who had been sitting in front, turned around and laughed. "This movie isn't scary at all." Panicking, I tried to pull my hand away, but Jodie tightened her grip, keeping our hands hidden beneath her jacket as if it were our little secret. Later that night, back at home, My heart was still pounding in my chest. What had just happened? Why had Jodie? And why did I? Nothing about it felt right. Before I could figure it out, my phone buzzed with a message from the bank. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. Every cent from the joint account Garth and I shared was gone, leaving just a pitiful $5.20. That account had once held $20,000, $18,000 of which I had saved by working part-time jobs, tutoring, and delivering food during school breaks. It was supposed to be the seed money for our future together after graduation, for when we would move back home and start our new lives. I rushed over to Garth, trying to keep my voice steady. Garth, what did you do with that money? That was everything I've been saving. Garth looked at me with a mix of annoyance and indifference, raising an eyebrow. Wow, you say you love me, but the moment I spend some cash, you come after me? His words were sharp, a clear dismissal. No, I want to know why, I said softly, trying not to upset him. He shrugged casually. Jodie's birthday is coming up. She invited us to her party, and I bought her a gift. I was stunned. I understand buying her a gift, but we're still students. Did it have to be so expensive? I pleaded. Garth's expression hardened. Do you even know who Jodie is? She's surrounded by wealthy kids. The average gift is worth over $1,000. You want me to look like a fool? He must have noticed how upset I was because he softened slightly, pulling me into a loose embrace. Come on, babe. If I look bad, you look bad too. We're a team, right? This gift is from both of us. I hesitated. But Garth's face darkened, and I immediately backed down. His cold shoulder could last for days, sometimes weeks, and I couldn't bear that kind of silent punishment. So I forced a smile and nodded. I told myself that Jodie was a good person, that it was right to give her a nice gift. But the image of me drenched in sweat, hauling bags of food up 6 flights of stairs for delivery, stuck in my mind. The day before the party, Jodie surprised me with a gift. A champagne-colored fishtail dress with soft pink roses embroidered at the chest. When I tried it on, I was astonished at how perfectly it fit, accentuating all my best features. For the first time, I felt like a princess in a fairy tale, admiring myself in the mirror. But Garth, sprawled on the couch, brought me back to reality with a single remark. Don't get too full of yourself. You're just going to be Jodie's backdrop. I don't even know why she gave you that dress. He paused, staring at me as though he had realized something. Why would she give you a dress? Unless. He didn't finish his sentence, but I could feel the weight of his thoughts hanging in the air. Was Jodie jealous? Did she see me as competition? I didn't really care what Garth meant anymore. I was beginning to feel something darker towards him. A flicker of resentment. Jodie's chauffeur arrived to pick us up for the party at her family's estate. As I stood before the grand villa, its fountains framed by massive rose arrangements, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Garth, without so much as a glance back, strode ahead, eager to meet Jodie. I trailed behind in my heels, struggling to keep up. My hand instinctively reached out for Garth, but before I could grasp him, Jodie appeared at the door. She stepped outside, dressed in a champagne suit with a pink rose pinned to her chest, her ponytail high and her brows sharp. She looked like some ethereal creature caught between masculinity and femininity, like a graceful white crane. She ignored Garth entirely, walking straight towards me with a smile. Welcome, she said, wrapping one arm around my waist while taking my hand with the other. Her fingers, slender and cool, felt like snakes weaving between mine. The closeness made me uncomfortable, and I quickly pulled away. Garth, feeling slighted, rushed over to her and playfully tapped her on the shoulder. Hey, why the suit? You look like a tomboy. Jodie's expression shifted, her smile fading just a fraction. She replied with a mocking laugh. Touch me again and I'll chop off that hand. The birthday dinner was simple yet elegant, with only a handful of guests seated around the table, enjoying gourmet dishes like lobster, foie gras, and caviar. The food was exquisite, unlike anything I'd ever tasted. I devoured it eagerly until I noticed Jodie watching me from across the table, her elbow resting on the surface, her gaze amused. Garth noticed too, and with a discreet pinch, he silently told me to compose myself. I quickly wiped my mouth and sipped at my drink, trying not to look foolish. As the party wound down and guests left, Jodie, slightly disheveled from the wine, turned her gaze to me again, her eyes heavy with something I couldn't quite place. I quickly made an excuse to leave, but Jodie's voice rang out. It's late. You should stay the night. Before I could respond, Garth jumped in. Sounds good. Jodie smiled sweetly. Caroline, you'll stay with me on the first floor. Garth, you can take the second floor. I quietly whispered to Garth. I really don't feel well. My head's been aching all night. I think I'm getting sick. Garth barely glanced at me. You'll be fine after some rest. You're always overreacting. I didn't know how to drive, so I had no choice but to stay. Lying in bed, my body began to burn with fever. I pulled the covers tighter around me, hoping I could just sleep it off until morning. But as the room grew darker and quieter, the throbbing in my head intensified. I tossed and turned, slipping in and out of a restless sleep. Suddenly, a flash of lightning lit up the room, and I realized just how hot I was. My skin felt like it was on fire, the heat radiating from my bones. I knew I couldn't wait until morning. I needed help. I tried to stand but collapsed after just 2 steps, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The sound broke the silence of the night, and moments later, my bedroom door creaked open. In the dim light from the storm outside, I saw Jodie standing in the doorway. Her eyes were deep, unreadable, as she stepped towards me, her cool hand brushing against my burning forehead. You're burning up. Why didn't you say anything? I didn't want to bother you, I mumbled through the haze of fever. Jodie's voice was calm but firm. I just moved in, so I don't have any medicine here. I'll take you to the hospital. Thank you, I whispered weakly. Her slender hands wrapped tightly around my waist, and in one swift motion, she lifted me up with surprising strength. Jodie Atkins, ever meticulous, bundled me up in a raincoat, carefully adjusting my hood to protect me from the downpour. I was too dazed to resist, my mind foggy from the fever and exhaustion. I didn't even remember to look for Garth Scotchmer. With the raincoat fastened and a mask placed gently over my face, I found myself murmuring in a haze. Happy birthday, Jodie. She froze for a moment, then leaned down, her warm breath grazing my ear as she whispered. Why didn't you say that earlier during the party? Everyone else did, but you were hiding in the corner. The memory was faint, but I recalled how dazzling she had looked, surrounded by people offering toasts. I had shrunk back, too intimidated to approach. Still, I had wanted to say it, and now, in this quiet moment between the two of us, the words slipped out. Caroline, you're such an idiot. Her voice carried a teasing edge, and a shiver ran down my spine. I barely had time to process her words before she placed me gently in the back seat of a car. I must have fallen asleep almost immediately. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer in the car. I was slung over Jodie's back, her firm grip keeping me secure as the rain pounded around us. My ears were filled with the steady drumbeat of the storm, and through the gray darkness, the highway stretched on endlessly. The only warmth in that cold, wet night was from the soft glow of the occasional street lamp, casting a protective halo around us. I instinctively tightened my hold on her shoulders. Jodie, put me down. I can walk, I muttered weakly. The car broke down halfway, and we've still got 5 kilometers to go. There's a hospital down the mountain. Just stay still. No. You're too thin to carry me. I'm heavy. Let me walk. You're burning up like a little furnace. I can't just let you suffer, she replied with unyielding determination. But then, as if sensing my worry, she softened her tone. I'm stronger than I look, Caroline. Carrying you is no big deal. Just sit tight, we're almost there. I couldn't understand how someone so slender could have such strength. Yet here she was, trudging through the storm, carrying me on her back for 5 long kilometers. She had even thrown her own raincoat over me, leaving herself exposed to the relentless rain. Droplets streamed down her face, tracing along the strands of her soaked hair like strings of pearls. I couldn't tell if the moisture on my face was from the rain, or my own tears. Please, let me walk. I can do it, I insisted one last time. Caroline, don't be silly. How could I let you suffer like that? After Jodie carried me to the hospital, I was overwhelmed with gratitude. I swore to myself that I'd never call her a green tea girl again. I even invited her over to our place after I recovered, blushing as I earnestly asked Garth Scotchmer to prepare for her visit. Garth seemed pleased, remarking that I was finally learning to be more sensible. On the day Jodie visited, she arrived with several bottles of wine, smiling as she handed them to me. These are from our family vineyard overseas. Let's open one for dinner. Garth was in unusually high spirits, donning an apron as he busied himself in the kitchen, determined to impress with his cooking skills. Funny how he rarely cooked for me, yet here he was, going all out for Jodie. But I didn't care anymore. Jodie and I sat on the floor, watching TV as the sound of sizzling filled the air. I glanced over at her and said sincerely, "Thank you, Jodie. If it weren't for you, I would have been a complete mess." She shot a glance at the kitchen, a faint smile curving her lips. Her clear eyes lingered on me, and for a moment, I saw something ripple beneath their surface, like a tiny spring bubbling up from the depths of her soul. The quiet tension between us was shattered when the sound of frying intensified in the kitchen. Without warning, Jodie moved closer, kneeling in front of me. She leaned in, her face inches from mine, her hands pressed into the carpet, trapping me in her shadow. Her eyes gleamed with a playful mischief, like a cat toying with its prey. "If you want to thank me," she whispered, her voice low and husky, "this is how." Before I could react, her lips crashed against mine, a fierce and unyielding kiss. It wasn't gentle or sweet. Nothing like the serene kiss of moonlight. It was wild, rough, like two animals fighting for dominance, each trying to leave their mark. Her tongue slipped past my lips, and I instinctively tried to push her away, but she was too strong. The kitchen noises seemed to fade into the background as we kissed, feverish and desperate. Jodie finally pulled back, her voice hoarse and teasing, "I told you I was skilled." Just as abruptly as it had started, the chaos ended. We quickly broke apart, both of us trying to act as though nothing had happened. Jodie nonchalantly grabbed a soda from the table, sipping it while I wiped my mouth and fiddled nervously with a small figurine on the table. Garth emerged from the kitchen with a plate of food, grinning. "Dinner's ready. Sorry to keep you waiting." We both pretended to be absorbed in our meals. At one point, Garth placed a piece of fish on Jodie's plate. She wrinkled her nose and said, "I don't like fish." Garth's smile faltered. "Really? I thought you used to love it." Jodie's lips curved into a cold smirk. "You're mistaken. I never liked it." The awkward silence that followed was palpable, and I quickly tried to diffuse the tension by taking the fish from her plate. "I'll have it. It's delicious," I said with a forced smile. Jodie's smile returned, but when she saw the look of gratitude on Garth's face, her expression darkened again. She muttered under her breath, "So greasy. We should have just gone out." Garth's chopsticks hesitated mid-air. He had always been the center of my attention, but when Jodie was around, he seemed to shrink under her sharp remarks. I had assumed he enjoyed her biting comments, that he was happy being her loyal follower. But tonight, even he seemed to grow weary of her veiled insults. "Such a princess," he muttered under his breath. "Can't even appreciate a simple meal." Jodie's sharp eyes glinted as she fired back. "Well, with your cooking skills, who could?" Caught between their bickering, I didn't know whose side to take. Both of them turned to me for validation. "Caroline, don't you think the food is good?" Their eyes bore into me, but I wasn't about to get caught in the crossfire. I need to use the restroom," I mumbled, fleeing the room as quickly as I could. Dinner ended in awkward silence, and as we prepared to leave, Jodie made one final demand. "Caroline, walk me to my car. Garth, you do the dishes." Don't even think about asking Caroline for help. In the dimly lit garage, she kissed me on the cheek before whispering, "Caroline, dump him and come with me. His food's like pig slop. I'll cook for you, much better." I stood there, speechless. When I returned to the apartment, Garth had already cleaned up. Feeling guilty for some inexplicable reason, I offered to help with the dishes, but he waved me off. For once, he seemed to be the one feeling apologetic. As he scrubbed the last plate, he sighed. "You don't find Jodie hard to deal with? She's such a handful these days. No wonder she's still single with that attitude." I didn't know how to respond. "She's not that bad," I offered weakly, trying to defend her. But Garth continued, his frustration apparent. "I've realized something tonight. Looks and body don't mean much if the personality's rotten. You though, you're perfect. So gentle and sweet. You take care of me without complaint." I fell silent. Later that night, Garth tried to get close to me, but I found myself repulsed. His words kept echoing in my head, and all I could feel was a deep sense of disgust. "I'm not feeling well," I lied, turning him down. He seemed taken aback but didn't push. Instead, He propped himself up on one elbow and looked at me with a strange intensity. Caroline, I've been a fool. He paused, his words slow and careful. Let's just move forward from here. Together. I wanted to break up with Garth. I had realized that whatever I had once felt for him had faded, replaced by indifference. When he spoke about our future, my heart didn't flutter. It remained still. Worse, in the quiet moments, my mind drifted back to Jodie. Summoning my courage, I said softly, Garth, we should break up. He exploded, panic flashing in his eyes. Why? We've been together almost 4 years. I'm just about to settle down. We'll get married in 2 years. Just wait. He grabbed my shoulders, shaking me as if the physical motion could shake the idea of leaving out of my head. I won't agree to this. Is this about Jodie? I was just being nice to her because she just got back. I swear, it won't happen again. I'm yours, Caroline. She's no good for me, you know that. His grip loosened slightly, and I stared into his eyes, asking quietly, what makes someone a good woman, Garth? His answer was immediate, almost rehearsed. A woman like you, sweet, obedient, who knows how to take care of me. I realized then that his idea of a perfect woman had nothing to do with love or respect. It was about someone who would cater to his needs. With a forced smile, Garth added, I won't let Jodie come between us. Look, I'll delete her from my life right now, just to prove it to you. Garth Scotchmer pulled out his phone and right in front of me, deleted Jodie Atkins from his contacts. Yet something felt hollow about it. All the good I had done in this relationship seemed to have been for others, never for myself. From the very beginning, Garth never truly cared about my inner world. I wasn't as kind or gentle as he imagined. Often, I avoided arguments simply because I didn't have the energy for them. Pleasing him was the fastest way to end the conflict. He never noticed my growing sense of depression and frustration. The more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no point in continuing this relationship. But Garth was too intense, his words too persistent. I nodded absent-mindedly just to appease him, letting him hold me tightly as if that would somehow fix everything. Once he left, I began packing my things. After I confided in Jodie Atkins about my plan to break up with Garth, she immediately offered me a spare room in her home. No sooner had Garth left than Jodie made a quick phone call, and within 2 hours, I had moved into her new place. The apartment was decorated in a style I loved, soft and princess-like, with pink tulip bunny cushions and dainty, feminine touches everywhere. But I knew from Jodie's Instagram that her own taste leaned toward minimalist decor. She wasn't delicate or fragile. She was like a seagull navigating stormy seas, fierce and assertive, someone who played with her prey like a cat. Once I moved in, Jodie and I spent a lot of time together. Back when I was living with Garth, my free time was spent doing things I didn't enjoy. Playing video games with him, doing chores, cooking, or washing his clothes. But with Jodie, we had similar interests. We could binge-watch TV shows, crying over emotional scenes and covering our eyes at the scary parts. We cooked together too, with Jodie's skills far surpassing mine. I found myself happily playing the role of her assistant, handing her ingredients while she praised me for helping out. She never took me for granted. She never sat around waiting for me to serve her. If I was busy, she'd immediately step in to help. There were no cold spells, no unexplained silences. If she couldn't see me, she'd always let me know in advance. Jodie showed me what a healthy relationship looked like. She made me realize that love wasn't about calculating who did more or who sacrificed less. I had thought Garth and I would end things peacefully, but he didn't see it that way. He couldn't accept the breakup, calling it an abrupt cliff ending. One day, he even showed up at my workplace. Luckily, it was after hours, and most people had already left. I had stayed late to finish some work when Garth stormed in, looking disheveled, with a dark shadow cast over his face. He grabbed my hand, his voice filled with desperation. Why did you suddenly move out? Why the sudden breakup? Did you fall for someone else? Tell me why. I looked at him, feeling detached. How had I ever been so taken with this man? There was no such thing as an abrupt breakup. All breakups were long planned, simmering beneath the surface. I had been done with him long before now. I had grown tired of constantly bending over backward to make him happy, of always being the one to compromise. I had grown tired of us being two souls that never truly connected. He had lived on my planet, but he had never explored it. With Jodie, it was different. We cared about each other, truly understood each other. If I fell asleep on the couch, she'd instinctively cover me with a blanket. She saw the depression Garth never noticed, the melancholy I had been hiding for so long. Jodie once joked, "When I first came back to the country, all the big opportunities were handed to men." I thought to myself, if only I were a guy. But then I met you, Caroline, and I no longer wished to be anything else. Being a woman allowed me to see the shadow of depression that lingered around you, something the world had trained you to suppress. She saw me in a way Garth never could. He had wanted a quiet, submissive girlfriend who wouldn't trouble him but would always be there to absorb his negative emotions. He had shaped me into that person. But with Jodie, I learned that I didn't have to be that way. After the breakup, Jodie took me on bike rides through crowded city streets, and she would suddenly shout, "Caroline, I love you." I couldn't help but remember how, when I had tried to hold Garth's hand in public, he would brush me off, embarrassed. He had said it was awkward with so many people around, but deep down, I knew he was just ashamed to be seen with someone he didn't think was attractive enough. Jodie and I argued sometimes, but whenever I told her I was upset, she would immediately send me messages to make things right. Nothing like Garth's cold shoulder treatment. I finally understood what I had been missing all along. Respect. Garth, still unable to accept our breakup, continued to harass me, swearing that he'd change. His eyes were bloodshot as he clung to my hand, his grip so tight it hurt. He demanded to know if there was someone else, convinced that I had left him for another man. But it wasn't that. I had explained countless times before what I needed: respect, understanding, communication. Every time, he had brushed it aside or changed the subject. Now, I no longer felt the need to explain anything to him. It wasn't my job to teach someone how to love. While Garth was still gripping my hand, Jodie burst in. I had sent her a message earlier, and she had rushed over from the hospital, her hand still marked with blood from pulling out her fore. Seeing Garth holding on to me, Jodie didn't hesitate. She picked up the nearest object, a thermos, and swung it at his head. "Let go of Caroline." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the pretense of his so-called love. "You're acting all emotional now, but where were you before?" she mocked. "You claim to care now, but you never respected Caroline while you were together. You didn't care about her feelings when you were trailing after me like a pathetic dog. You think I didn't see through your little game? You thought I'd entertain your advances? I despise you." She turned to me, her eyes as sharp and bright as ever. "Love isn't something you give out in pieces, Garth. It's whole and complete, or it's nothing at all." Her words weren't just for Garth. They were a confession to me. Garth, enraged, lunged at her, but Jodie, having learned self-defense, swiftly pinned his arm behind his back. "If you come near Caroline again, I'll make sure you regret it," she warned. Later, as Jodie drove me home, I noticed that her white dress was stained with blood, either hers or Garth's. The night sky hung heavy, like tears about to fall. As she prepared to leave, I grabbed her hand. "Why do you love me?" I asked, my voice small. "I'm ordinary, insecure, and depressed. I don't see anything in me that's worth loving." Jodie had always noticed the little things, like how I kept my head down or how I instinctively walked along the edges of rooms. Even in a crowded elevator, I would huddle in the corner, trying not to be seen. With a gentle smile, she replied, "Caroline, the first time we had dinner, I noticed how you quietly pushed your drink towards someone whose glass was empty. I love the way your lashes flutter when you do something kind, almost shyly. I love how you sat in the corner at my birthday party, sipping wine, trying to approach me but always retreating. I even love the way you cried after arguing with Garth, wiping your tears when you thought no one was looking." She gazed into my eyes, her voice soft yet steady. "I love everything about you. If you want to grow, I'll be the one who lifts you up. But if you're tired, I'll be the one to shield you. Whether you're lazy or driven, angry or sad, I'll take all of you." Jodie stood before me, like a rare flower blooming in the stillness of the night. Her confession was unique, and it made my heart race. She leaned in close, whispering playfully, "Shall I come upstairs with you? Remember what I said about how talented my tongue is?" Our relationship wasn't easy. We didn't have the blessing of most people. Garth spread rumors about Jodie, saying she was neither male nor female, that she had been ruined abroad and returned only to seek out women. But Jodie didn't hesitate. She hired someone to rough him up and had him dismissed from his internship. Some people pitied me, thinking I was settling for a woman because I couldn't find a man. Jodie and I both despised that kind of attitude. So, I boldly opened an account to document our life together. Jodie was touched that I was willing to publicly acknowledge our relationship. As confident as she seemed, even she had her insecurities. One day, she pulled me aside, forcing me to sign a contract that transferred 3 properties and several businesses into my name. "Caroline, I dragged you into this mess. These are yours now. You're not a burden. You're my salvation," I reassured her. But Jodie still had her fears. Fears that I would eventually leave her under the pressure of societal judgment. She tried to show me how much she cared, even helping me start my own clothing brand. After we celebrated our 26th birthdays together, Jodie timidly asked me, "Do you want to go to Iceland? Or maybe Belgium, Canada, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden?" I couldn't help but laugh at her uncharacteristic hesitation. "Why not become my legal wife? My girlfriend?" I asked with a smile. The end. Thanks for stopping by. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos.